Welcome everyone to today's webinar, which is titled Making Your Media Impressions Matter. I am Tom Albers, President of Albers Communications Group. Today what we will be covering is the measurement trends in the public relations industry, including the Barcelona Principles of Measurement. We will also be talking about the media tracking recommendations and examples of what some of the biggest brands are doing when it comes to media placement analysis. And I will close today with some tips for making the most of your earned media relations efforts, with a particular focus on improving the quality of your media coverage. At the end, I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have, so feel free to chat those in throughout today's presentation. I wanted to start by giving you a little bit of background about Albers Communications Group. We are a full-service PR and social media agency headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska. We strongly believe that PR and social media really go hand in hand, and they work best when used as part of an integrated communication strategy. We represent clients in all 50 states and Canada. Our team of PR and social media specialists helps our clients achieve exposure nationally and locally in their operating markets throughout the country. We have specialized expertise working with companies that have multiple locations throughout the United States, whether that be franchise locations, retail stores, offices, or branch locations. As in any business, in PR, measurement plays a very important role in determining whether we are allocating our time and resources in the most effective ways. To be honest with you, the PR industry has really struggled for a long time to arrive at a universally accepted set of measurement guidelines. In 2010, really this began to change when a group of industry leaders headed by the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communications, which is also known as AMEC, got together to create a set of 7 PR measurement principles which have become known as the Barcelona Principles. You may have heard of this term, the Barcelona Principles, and as you may have guessed, the name Barcelona comes from the city where the planning meetings took place. Now, in today's presentation, we don't have time to really concentrate on all 7 of these principles, and the focus today is going to be specifically on measuring the impact of earned media, or the other name that typically goes by is publicity or free exposure. Now, the 3 Barcelona principles that focus squarely on this topic are numbers 1, 4, and 5. And they have to do with, as we look at the screen, they have to do with goal setting. They have to do with measuring both quantity and quality of your news media exposure. And also, they have to do with the issue of advertising value equivalence, also known as AVEs. And throughout today's presentation, when I refer to AVEs, I'm referring to advertising value equivalence, and I will explain what that means a little bit later. And what we will be doing today is really walking through these 3 principles and talking about how they might apply to your PR measurement and analysis. If you would like to learn more about all of the Barcelona Principles of Measurement, I suggest that you visit the AMEC website. On screen at the bottom here, I'm pointing to it, is a link to a special section dedicated to the Barcelona Principles. And I know this is a humongous URL, and because of that, I'm going to include this URL in the email that we send to you with the recording of today's session. Now, the first Barcelona principle that I mentioned underscores the importance of goal setting in public relations. Of course, this applies to all PR activities, including your earned and social media strategies. Just like any business activity that you may undertake, if you are investing dollars to be quoted in the media or investing dollars in your publicity efforts, then of course you should do so with specific goals in mind. A very common mistake, and it's probably the most common mistake that I see that businesses make when they enter into a strategy to seek media coverage is they do so without clearly defining their goals. I feel the best place to always start with this is to sit back or I should say take a step back and ask yourself, what business problems are you trying to solve with your media relations efforts? Because the answer to this question will really inform your media relations strategies and help you begin to identify the key factors that you are going to need to employ in your efforts. And those factors include the specific media that you wish to target, the messages that you need to deliver through your efforts, and of course, who the appropriate spokespeople may be within your company. We work with clients in a variety of industries, and each of our clients really has different business goals for their earned media strategies. And it's very possible that you may have several goals for your media relations strategies. Just to give you some examples of some of our client goals for media relations, they include increasing brand awareness with particular key audiences. They include strengthening relationships with referral sources. Also, identifying more qualified job candidates. Maybe you've had difficulty really recruiting good, solid job candidates, and you certainly can use PR to help with that. Perhaps calling attention to specific products or services. We see this in play especially when our clients are introducing a new service or product to the marketplace. And finally, of course, in the case of our nonprofit clients, one of their goals tends to be raising additional funds. Principle number 4 really focuses on this issue of quantity and quality. And what it states is that when measuring the impact of your earned media exposure or your publicity efforts, again, as it's referred to often, you need to look at both the quantity and the quality side. So let's take a look at the quantity side. Many companies look specifically at 2 factors when it comes to the quantity of the exposure that they're creating through their media relations. First, they look at overall number of media impressions they're creating through their efforts. And second, they are looking at what is called share of voice, which essentially is a measurement of their presence in the news media compared to the competition. And this pie chart over here shows you an example of what this might look like if your company is in dark blue, how your company's share of voice relates to the competition. Now, with the creation of the Barcelona Principles, there really is a very strong trend towards paying more attention to measuring the quality of media exposure in addition to the quantity. Now, the factors you may measure or want to measure when you're looking at quality will be unique for your particular company, depending again upon how you answer that question. What problems are we trying to solve, which will lead you to the goals for your particular media relations efforts. But some standard quality measures include the tone or sentiment of your news stories, which refers to whether the media coverage is overall positive, negative, or neutral, and message pull-through or message penetration, which measures if your messages appear in each story that you're placing. At the bottom of the slide here is a sample media tracking report that shows how you can really combine both the quantity and quality measuring into your media tracking system. And just to point out a few things here, so this is an Excel database that you may maintain to really track your media coverage. And you can see that we have some quality measures here. I mentioned tonality, so whether the story was overall positive, neutral, or perhaps negative in tone. And then, of course, message penetration. And you may have different messages, frankly, that you're trying to promote for products, different messages that you're trying to promote for community relations. You want to keep track of whether these messages are actually appearing in your news coverage. And this is another thing that I haven't mentioned yet, but is very helpful, and a little later I will allude more to this, and that is the topic of your coverage. You want to know what the media is typically covering in your industry, and of course you want to positively influence that. So in this particular example, we're showing coverage about products of this particular company. We're showing community relations coverage, and also what might be classified as industry affairs coverage. And then over here we get into the quantitative side of things, which is the circulation or reach of these particular stories. I did want to mention a particular trend that's happening in the PR industry, especially with very large companies. A trend is that these companies are creating their own unique media algorithms, which essentially rate each media placement on a variety of quality factors to arrive at a scoring system. And that scoring system is typically, traditionally based on either a 5-point or a 100-point scale. So literally every single story is scored on either a 5-point or a 100-point scale, dependent upon certain quality measures. I recently participated in a global media measurement symposium in San Francisco, and several companies, including Symantec, which is best known, of course, for making the Norton antivirus software, and Microsoft, spoke about their particular algorithms. And on screen, I have included some of the things that Symantec and Microsoft look at. Symantec calls their system a QM score, and they score each story based on 3 factors. First off, whether their product appeared in the story, the tone or sentiment of the coverage, and whether their messages were pulled through in their stories or message penetration. Microsoft calls theirs the prime score, and it looks at similar factors with the addition of prominence of the media coverage and whether or not the story included a call to action. Now, maintaining such a system may not always be practical. In fact, we represent a very large national retailer that at one time maintained its own media algorithm, but they eventually abandoned this practice because the effort, in their perspective, the effort outweighed the benefits. I recommend that most companies stick to tracking key quality metrics similar to the spreadsheet over here that I mentioned to you, tracking things such as tonality, message penetration, even the topic or theme of the coverage that you're getting. What this will allow you to do is track trends and make adjustments to your media relations strategies as necessary. And I do want to give you an example of how this might play itself out in your particular company. Go to this slide here. And the assumption with this company in this example is that one of the main reasons they want to be involved in media relations is to attract more job candidates. If this is the case, then periodically this company will want to examine their news coverage based upon topics or themes of their story. This graph shows, I'm going to use the pointer here to point out, this little pie slice shows that overall right now at this point in time, 7% of their stories are about workplace issues or topics that position their company as a great place to work. Now, depending upon their goals, they may think that perhaps that is a little low for them to accomplish their goals. And so this may be an indicator to them that they need to maybe shift some efforts. Maybe they need to shift efforts from industry affairs, for instance, and put more emphasis on gaining media coverage and promoting campaigns that have to do with positioning the company as a great place to work. Now let's tackle this issue of advertising value equivalence, or AVEs. The final Barcelona Principle, number 5, that we are going to look at says that AVEs are not equal to the value of public relations. Let's first define what we mean by AVEs. This is the practice of equating the value of your PR programs to the amount of money it would have cost you to purchase that same space or time in advertising dollars. For example, if your company was featured in a 20-inch story in the Chicago Tribune, then the value of the story would have been equated to how much that space would have cost in advertising dollars. Now, the Barcelona Principles establish that this is not an acceptable way to measure the value of public relations. Now, I could list probably 10 reasons why this is really the trend in the PR industry, but I've listed 3 on screen, and they are that the AVE approach really is too limiting because it doesn't account for the fact that a PR message is much more credible than an advertising message. Also, with the AVE approach, you do not adequately distinguish between the quality measures that we discussed earlier, which include things such as tonality of a story and whether your messages appeared in that story. And finally, AVEs cannot measure the value of keeping a client out of the media spotlight if they have a crisis on their hands. Before moving on to our next subject, I did want to close out the measurement section by offering you my observation on trends that are happening with PR measurement. Now, some of these points, of course, will reiterate topics that we've already covered. At the measurement symposium that I mentioned earlier that I attended, it was very clear that companies such as Microsoft, Best Buy, FedEx are developing separate budgets to measure the impact of their PR programs. In fact, several of the speakers made that a clear point, that when you are starting to develop your PR programs and your media relations programs, it's important to keep in mind that you also need to budget for the measurement and analysis piece. There is definitely a new focus on measuring quality of media exposure in addition to the quantity of a media exposure that you are achieving. The result of this is that many companies, again, are developing their own algorithms or scorecards. However, there is a realization that it is not practical to apply the scorecards to every single media placement. So what companies are doing, companies like Microsoft and Symantec, what they're doing is they are picking specific media coverage to analyze. Now, this depends on what your goals are, but some companies are choosing media in certain markets to analyze, or they're choosing certain types of media to analyze. Or, like for instance, the top 50 bloggers or the top 50 newspapers, that sort of an approach to really hone in on specific priority media. There is, as you guys have gotten the message today, I'm sure, there is a general consensus that advertising value equivalents do not measure the value of PR. And finally, share of voice is still considered a valuable metric. Now, I want to finish today's presentation by looking at 5 practical ways you can enhance the quality of your earned media exposure. But first, I always like to start with the end in mind. So when we say quality, what do we mean? And I'd like to challenge you, everybody who's listening, answer this question for yourself. If you had a media story that appeared about your company, what qualities would the perfect story have? Now, I've created my own list, the things that I would think of in terms of client stories, and we'll go through these. Of course, the story would appear in a media outlet that reaches your key audience. That's a starter. If we had our way, the story would not include any of your competitors and would be positive in tone. Of course, if it's negative in tone, we'd hope for the opposite, right? We'd hope that your brand was left out of the story. We'd also like your messages to be included in the story, and even more, we'd like for those messages to lead prospective clients to your front door by encouraging them to take action. Ideally, we'd like the story to include a third-party endorsement, which could mean perhaps quotes from one of your clients or quotes from one of your referral sources. We'd also hope, this is kind of a basic hope and wish for media stories, but we'd hope that all of the facts are accurate. And finally, we'd like for the story to be prominent. I mentioned prominence earlier when talking about quality of news stories, and really the prominence of stories can be helped by inclusion of photography or perhaps inclusion of video featuring your company. So now that we've established a baseline of, okay, so what does the perfect story look like, I'm going to look at 5 tips on how to get there. So for starters, if you have not already conducted media training for the people within your organization who will serve as the media spokespeople, I strongly recommend this. Most people who are not media trained arrive at a media interview thinking their job is to answer questions. But the reality is that their job is to deliver a specific message or specific messages. Media training should really hit on two fronts. You should cover the techniques of delivering a message and also include mock interviews to practice those techniques. In our media training sessions that we provide to our clients, undoubtedly the most valuable part of the training, and we hear this from our clients, are those practice interviews. So they can actually practice the skills that we are conducting with them through the training. The second tip is developing message points for each and every media interview opportunity. Remember that message penetration will most likely be one of the factors that you will look at when measuring the quality of your exposure. Therefore, it is important to devote time to committing these messages to paper and reviewing them with your spokespeople prior to interviews. Now on screen here, I've pulled a quote from a recent story for one of our clients. One of our clients is Farmers National Company. Farmers National is the largest farm real estate company in the country, and it's important for them to send a message about the confidence that landowners have in farmland as an investment. And this quote, which comes from one of their company executives, really conveys this message about confidence in the land market. Another thing that we always try to do in our media relations campaigns is to include a call to action. These calls to action can be many things. It can be calling people to attend an event. It can be calling people to visit a website for educational resources, or perhaps entering a contest. Frankly, some of our campaigns have included all of these and more calls to action. They're important. Calls to action are important because they allow you to track whether your media impressions are prompting people to take this action. It's very measurable. If you are trying to get people to your website, that is very measurable. If you're trying to get people to an event, again, that's very measurable. On screen is a current campaign that we are working on for our client, Signal 88 Security. One of our goals for Signal 88 is to generate interest among potential franchise owners. We are currently running a contest that will award prize money to military veterans who want to start their own businesses. How do we know our media relations efforts are working? Well, we know because entrants are learning about the contest through our story placements, and we know firsthand that this is happening. Whenever possible, give some thought to the media support materials that you can provide to the news media to help them tell their story. And also, of course, tell your story. This will increase your prominence in any stories that occur. It'll help assist with message pull-through and also help ensure the accuracy of the reporting. We are currently working on a campaign for our client, Homestead Senior Care, in which we are offering the news media many background resources, which include an executive summary that was conducted on the topic that we were talking about, as well as photographs. Over here I'm pointing to some of the photographs that are available to the news media, as well as video footage. Tip number 5, and the final tip, is to think ahead to the sources you can provide to the media to help them tell their story. Of course, we want them to interview a spokesperson from your company, but handpicking other sources for them will help maintain the direction of the story. It'll help lessen the chances of them speaking to your competition, and will also increase the chances of having a third-party testimonial in the story. Such sources that you might think of including in your media relations efforts include representatives from trade associations or nonprofit groups, perhaps, that are relevant to your industry, experts from universities or governmental agencies, and of course, your clients, and referral sources can all be really good sources to include in news stories. Now, before getting to questions and answers, I would like to wrap up today's presentation with a summary of just a few of the high-level recommendations. First off, prior to launching your earned media campaigns, start with that question. What business problems are you trying to solve? And identify the business goals you want to achieve. With the business goals in mind, then think about how you can establish measurement systems that tie to these goals, and then create processes that will allow you to continually track and analyze media coverage. Finally, quality is king these days when it comes to media evaluation, I should say. Look for ways to enhance your media coverage to support your business goals. Before starting the Q&A session, I did want to tell you about the upcoming webinars in our ongoing series. On April 17th, our Director of New Media, Gina Pappas, will address the art of storytelling. Gina will include information about how to find your story and also successfully keep it alive both offline and online. On June 19th, I will be talking about best practices for avoiding and managing potential crisis situations. You can pre-register right here. We have the website where you can pre-register for these sessions at alberscommunications.com/learning opportunities. This is also the same place where you can go to listen to the recordings of today's webinar as well as recordings of all of our past presentations. Now I'm going to ask Gina Pappas, our Director of New Media, to come online and facilitate the Q&A session.
Hi, everyone. I have a couple of questions here. First one, how do you get newspapers to run the stories? For example, like Homestead Senior Care with the Salute to Senior Service Program. What makes them choose to use your story or not?
Well, that's the ultimate question, isn't it? And something that we face every day working with our clients is ultimately we need to rise to the level of news for that news organization. And so honestly, it starts very early with the planning of the campaign. We want a campaign that appeals to the news value of an organization. And the news, I could go on and on and on about what news value means and what editors look for, but they look for topics that impact a lot of people. They look for topics that are local in nature, and the Salute to Senior Service campaign that was referred to in the question is actually a campaign that we are doing for Homestead Senior Care right now. And both of those qualities apply to that campaign. It impacts a lot of people because there are a lot of seniors who do volunteer, and it is very local because we are recognizing seniors at the local level. Beyond that, it's follow-up with the news media. It's having those dialogue and that conversation with the news media outlets to really, frankly, try to make it as easy as possible for them to tell their story. And it gets back to some of the things I mentioned earlier, like providing them with resources, providing them with information, providing them with fact sheets, photographs. You know, anything you can do to make it easy for them to tell their story will help you break through the clutter of all the press releases they're receiving. And ultimately, that phone call does wonders.
Okay, next question. How has cultivating relationships with editors changed in the face of social media, digital media, and other current day realities?
Yeah, that's very insightful because, yeah, certainly the news media, I would say for starters, of all the populations that are out there, in different career fields, the news media are probably the most prolific users of social media. So if you are trying to be active in the media relations game, then you need to be active in social media. You need to develop relationships with them. You need to follow them, for instance, on Twitter. You need to follow them on Facebook, because a trend that I've seen, especially locally in the Omaha news market, but I know it's happening in other markets around the country, a lot of reporters, especially TV reporters, have their own Facebook presence. They're almost trying to create really a following for their own reporting. And so what you need to do is really be aware of that, but also start to engage with them in that way, because often they'll do their sourcing for news stories through crowdsourcing. They'll put out a tweet, I'm looking for someone to talk about XYZ, a particular topic. And so that really is important. And also, in one of our previous presentations, we talked about gearing your own social media presence. If you have a Facebook page, gearing your own social media presence, knowing that one of your audiences is the news media. And how does that impact what you put out there? Well, it could impact the type of information you put out there. You might want to put out some trends because the media is always looking for trends to report on. And we've had several, Gina being one of them, several of our staff members interviewed by the news media based upon perhaps a blog that Gina wrote or a Facebook post that Katina made. So be aware that they're an audience for you too, and guide your content in that direction, not forgetting, of course, your other audiences.
Okay, and the final question. We've heard that many busy executives don't have time to open videos, yet there's another message out there that video is a great mechanism to use for sharing your message. What have been our clients' experience, and how important is video?
Well, Gina, I'll have you answer that question since you're really on the cutting edge of what we're doing with video, and I can chime in as well.
Sure. Videos, if you're going to use them, they need to be short, generally 60 to 90 seconds, definitely under 2 minutes. If you want to capture someone's attention, they need to be topical. They need to be very specific in their description so that people know what they're getting into before they click on it and open it. A lot of companies use video as a way to help boost their search engine performance, and it's almost less about clicking on the video and having people watch the video as it is having video content live out on YouTube, which is integrated with Google, which is going to help you perform better in search. So even if you don't sit down and watch a video, and if busy executives feel like it may be more worthwhile to just skim an article to get the information that they need, there are values to video aside from actual numbers of people who click on it and watch it and utilize it. So for our clients, I can tell you that when we do a video, we put it on, cross-promote it on the website or on the Facebook page, and those are the types of posts, that's the type of content that gets the most engagement socially. So, when we share a video on another platform, it's definitely engaged with more. So there are a lot of value adds to it besides just people clicking on it and watching it.
Excellent. I knew there was a reason I threw that question to you, Gina. Is that it? Were there any other questions?
That's it.
All right. Well, I do thank you all for participating, and then if you wouldn't mind filling out that questionnaire and providing us with some comments and perhaps even future topics that you'd like to see us cover. Thank you for joining us this morning, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye.